welcome everyone, and good to see all of you. I think I'm meeting most of you, many of you for the first time. So welcome to Rishi. We have a special guest today, Partha Ghosh ji. Partha Ghosh ji is more like a mentor and a friend, and we met for the first time in April in Boston when the Rishi delegation had gone for 2 weeks to visit different universities and different cities and meet like-minded people, share the idea of Rishihood, invite support, in all kinds of support, academic collaborations, intellectual inputs, finances. So in that part, one of our first meetings in the US was actually with the group in which Partha ji was also a part. So since then there have been a lot of our virtual discussions where we found resonance, and especially on this topic of how do we create leaders, we feel that there are a lot of ideas that resonate between his work and the work that we are trying to do at Rishi. I'll give a brief background. I'm sure many of you would have read it. So he's a policy advisor and a strategist for corporates and governments. He's also known worldwide as an innovator of business and economic models, and currently enjoys advisory relationships with multiple organizations in more than half a dozen nations. Earlier, he was a partner at McKinsey. I think definitely for the MBA learners here, one of the dream companies. So he was a partner and the founder and managing director of the firm Partha Ghosh Associates. He's also chaired several startups such as Boston Analytics, Global Online, and Intersoft Japan. He has 2 advanced degrees, MS and MBA from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and his undergrad was at IIT Kharagpur. In fact, that is how we met, because we had reached out to the Pan IIT alumni group, and they, thankfully they got us in touch with him. He was the winner of the Institute Medal for being the top graduating student from the Chemical Engineering Department at IIT Kharagpur, and recently the Institute IIT Kharagpur has also established an academy in his name by the Academy of Partha Ghosh Academy of Leadership to train future leaders. So it's our good fortune that he could come here today and interact with you in your very initial journey of life and learning and career and leadership. So today's talk is going to be about how the world is shaping and how leadership in 21st century, what do we mean by leadership in 21st century, and especially for all of us who are from India and have a sense of passion for contributing to India. So he is someone who has a lot of ideas to share. So first he will be giving a talk to all of us, and then we can have questions. Okay. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening to all of you. And of course, welcome to the newcomers. First time in the boardroom and first time to the university campus. I must say that as I walked into the campus, I felt I should go back 40 years and restart my life, because what you are going to experience in this university would be something very special, and I tell you why it should be special. And of course, the point I'd like to make this evening is what you want to make out of this university will really depend upon how you want to engage with your inner self, with your friends, and with the faculty in the university. When I met Shahil and the team in Boston, I was very impressed with the name, Rishihood University. It means a lot to me because the term Rishi is basically a concept of wisdom, concept of sage. And I think it's important for all of us, whether you are 10 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old, 80 years old, to bring out the sage in you, the wisdom in you. And it needs an effort. It's not easy. And I think Rishihood has created a movement, I would call, where it would build public policy leaders, where young people like you would soon take the responsibility, and before you know, you'll be soon in leadership roles somewhere in the world. And that's where we want to see people like you shine, and in the process make this country a very, very special country, which the world would look up to. And that's why I would like to talk about the world first. Where is the world today? Then I would like to discuss a little bit where is India in the setup, in this global setup? And as a result, the leadership role that you must play to make India more the center of the global efforts that is going on, and that will go on in the next 25, 30 years. So that would be the structure of today's discussion. So the first point, the world is in a state of tremendous change, much more than you would imagine. Just to give you a little bit of a view, there are 7 major forces which are really very dramatic in nature. The first one, which we all face across the world with equal amount of intensity, is the climate change. And that is serious, that is dangerous, and there definitely questions the fundamental philosophy that we have believed in our country, Vedic philosophy, the harmony with nature. That harmony has been broken. So I'll come to why Vedic philosophy will be important in the future later on. But the harmony between the nature and the human being has been broken. As a result, we are facing a challenge of climate. Secondly, there's a tremendous rise in nationalism. If you think of what's happening in Hungary, what's happening in Turkey, what is happening in Russia, the people are becoming more and more nationalistic, which is a bit new because until about 15 years ago, people were talking about globalization, that we are part of the one global community, we are all living in our own villages, but we are part of the same humanity. But unfortunately, that equation has been broken a little bit. Now there's a tremendous sense of nationalism. Now patriotism is good, but nationalism is question mark. Patriotism means I love the country, as part of this country I serve the world. So I think that is the number 2. Number 3 challenge that we face today is the increasing gap between rich and poor. You see that this country is very easy to watch that. You see it all over the place. People like you are highly privileged that you could sit in a boardroom and have a discussion on the world. But there's another 70% who is struggling to feed themselves. And that's true. And you cannot neglect that. But it is not only visible in India, now it is even becoming visible in the United States. It's becoming visible in many parts of the world. And also the gap between rich countries, like I just came from Doha, what I see there in Qatar and what I see in this country, you cannot even compare. It doesn't make sense almost. But that is real, that is a very serious force. That is the third force. The second force. The third one, which I think is extremely important, is the decreasing trust people have in institutions. People are not trusting. There's a lack of ethics. But it is very important for each one of you. First, I would request, it's very easy to blame others, but I think we have to first learn how to look at ourselves so people can trust you, which means how do we bring back honesty and ethics in our day-to-day life. There's clearly a decadence of ethics. That's the third challenge. The fourth challenge I see is that there are several hotspots, the tensions developing between different regions of the world. Earlier it was Soviet Union, which doesn't exist today, versus United States, or the Western nation. The Soviet Union, as you know, has broken since 1990s. Now we are talking about tension between Russia and China, Russia and Ukraine, Russia and Europe, China, United States, and China and Taiwan. There are a lot of different hotspots, and each of the hotspots are serious enough to lead to, hopefully not, a third world war. We are right there. But there's a lot of geopolitical tensions around the world, and we, being part of the global civilization, we have to feel responsible. At least we should track. You should understand what is going on. You cannot say, well, it doesn't bother me. You cannot say that, because world is global, and India is a very important part of the world. After all, 1.4 billion people out of 7.5 billion people live in this country. So that's the fourth challenge, the geopolitical. The fifth challenge is very interesting. We are talking about development. India's per capita consumption of any product is about 1/10 per capita compared to the United States. Maybe in some cases 1/20th. If you look at number of cars per capita, number of televisions per capita, number of cell phones per capita. India is still at the early stage, though every one of us have a cell phone, but there are many others who do not know what cell phone is. Now, if we follow that path, there would be not enough resources in the world. Neither hydrocarbon, nor lithium, not energy, not materials. So we have to think of a new path. That's a great opportunity, which I'll come when I come to the discussion of India. But one of the biggest challenges is lack of resources and also lack of places to throw the garbage out. Landfills are getting full. On the way coming to the Rishihood, commander was showing me a place, a landfill. There's no place to throw the garbage, no place to throw the carbon dioxide. So you can consume as much as you want because you have money, but you have to also worry about where will you throw the garbage. So the whole concept of linear processing has to move from linear to circular. So that is another trend. How many did I talk about so far? Five? Five. Two more to come. Two more to come. The sixth one, I think, is a very interesting one to me, that at least in the West, and I would like to believe in this country, there's a fundamental question mark that is capitalism delivering? Socialism has been rejected with the collapse of USSR, but capitalism is also being questioned because of what I discussed earlier, because of the gap between rich and poor, too much strength of materialism, and materialism means people become very short-term oriented because they become materialistic as opposed to spiritualism. So there would be a need for a newism, which we do not know. Maybe India could define that newism. But what is the newism? Because we don't have to accept that the world is between capitalism and socialism or communism. There are new terms. India should have the courage, we're talking about courage, to innovate new ways of constructive economic systems. So there is this is the sixth trend. And the seventh trend, which I think I took a note for this talk, which is a bit more kind of, I would call, deficit of leadership. The leadership model that we have developed over the last, I would say, 1,000 years, particularly with the rise of the West in the last 500 years and since the Industrial Revolution, has been around self-interest, around measurement criteria which you could measure, around materialism. That has to change. So the people around the world is talking about new types of leadership models. Now we don't know what that model might be, but these are clearly the 7 trends which will change the nature of the world in the next 50 years. So that's the first point I like to register with you. So it's a great opportunity to be young because you would create the next wave. Now, if you don't create, someone else in China would do it, or someone else in America would do it, or someone else in Brazil might do it. But I think India cannot afford to lose this opportunity. And fortunately, in the last, I would say last 10 years, there's a new sense of confidence in India, I sense, not because how much English you know, but new sense of confidence because we have got something in this country that we treasure. That is a new feeling. Whether you call it Vedikism or Hinduism or the Indian philosophical ethos, I think people have become more conscious. And that's one of the reasons perhaps we have started Rishihood. I said we, I've included myself with your permission. Okay, so I think that leads to my second point, where is India? Could we play the role? The world is going to change. And it will be a dramatic change. It would not be a linear change, it would be a discontinuous change. That you cannot say that this is how it's been in the past, it will go straight. It would be something different. New S-curve would be formed. So to form the new S-curve, we have to understand, could India play the role? And to answer that question, we have to answer, is India ready to play that role? Where is India? Now, before this talk, we were discussing a earlier that how did India look when I went to the United States and after I graduated from IIT Kharagpur. I worked here for 2-3 years and then I went to MIT. And when I spoke about India in the US, very few people literally cared about the country. It was unknown. I feel sad because it is one of the most ancient countries of the world, if not the ancient most country. But India really didn't have any image. It's a poor country. It got just liberated, 74. It was perhaps that time between 1947 and 74. We had spent about 30 years of freedom. So there was clearly a question mark. Who is India? What is India? Could India do anything for the world? But still our population that time was 750 million. It's still the biggest country, one of the biggest countries after China. Today when you talk about India, there's a different sense that yes, it may be the next superpower. That may be too much of a stretch. Maybe like China, India is going to become more important. Maybe that is too much of a stretch. Or at least there's some more seriousness with which people outside are looking at India. So the positive side is India has become more relevant today than before. But when you look at the numbers, which I think all of you should be familiar with, the numbers do not look good. I'll give you some numbers just for the sake of it. One of the easiest way to measure the progress of a country is to look at per capita income, right? All of you are familiar with the term per capita income. That means per person how much we are earning. India's reported number is $2,000, $2,100 per capita. Now some people would say there's a lot of unaccounted money, we cannot account for what's happening in the villages. I say, okay, multiply that with 3. That makes it $6,000 per capita. But China today reported is $18,000 per capita. Vietnam reported is $8,000 per capita. And if you look at many of the Eastern European countries, they are in the $10,000, $15,000 capita. Brazil is $18,000 per capita. So we have a long way to go. Point number 1. Point number 2, HDI index, which is a very important human development index, which is a measurement of different factors like sanitation, health, mortality, per capita income, access to social infrastructure, access to hospital. India ranks 130th. Now many may challenge, well, that's not the right measurement. Make it 100. But 100 is not good enough. There are 90 countries or 99 countries ahead of us. We have a lot of work to do. The third one is what people call corruption index. Now corruption is very difficult to measure, but we also, all of us participate in corruption. And I'll tell you how. Let's forget what others are doing. When you see a red light, how many of you stop in the red light? When you're supposed to cross at one place where there's a zigzag mark, do you cross at that place or you cross the road wherever you feel like? And we do that all the time. So that's corruption. Now when you have this kind of corruption in a country of 1.4 billion people, it's very difficult to develop the discipline that you need. Because you need 1.4 billion people. This country's population density is the highest in the world. Number of people per square meter, highest in the world. So every piece of land has to be treated with tremendous amount of discipline, with tremendous amount of respect and tremendous amount of honor. Are we doing so? So I think that's very important. So if you look at these 3 numbers, per capita income, HDI index, corruption index, clearly we are challenged. We have to work harder to overcome this. On the positive side, now which comes to my last point, that the 7 trends that I talked about, the world is facing, a lot of the fundamental knowledge that we have in this country, the wisdom that is in this country, what does Vedic philosophy talks about? I have reduced it down to 3 points. The first, harmony with nature. Vedic philosophy, we should know how to harmonize ourselves with nature. What does that mean? That we should know how to harmonize with each other, because all of us are part of nature. We should know how to harmonize with the nature in the sense, the ecological system, with the environment. And Vedic philosophy has been teaching us that for the last 10,000 years. We've been talking about it. I'll come to are we doing it? That is different, but definitely that treasure is there. The second is Vedic philosophy believes in one humanity. That we do not believe that we have to hate others, we have to harmonize with others, we have to work with others, we want to be inclusive, we want to embrace others, accommodate multiple point of views, and that's what we are taught. Are we doing that? But the world is looking for this kind of leadership who could accommodate multiple views. Third, what is the essence of Vedic philosophy? We believe there is a God in every human being. Divinity in every individual, every person. If you really believe in that, I'm glad to see Vivekananda's picture on your wall. And he used to say, I will first say it in Bengali, then I'll translate it in English. He used to say, Jibe prem kore jeijon, seijon, sebicheshwar. Anyone of you speak Bengali? No, you understand. So you can translate it from Jibe prem kore jeijon, seijon, sebicheshwar. Means a person who loves human beings. He is the one who is serving God. Ishwar is God. Now, do we believe in that? But this is what I think the world is looking for. And fortunately, what Indian philosophy and Indian philosophical ethos teaches us are these fundamental three. Obviously, there are many other rules and teachings, but if you reduce it to the basics, it really comes down to these 3 points. Now, in Rishihood, what you have to do is to bring out these 3 points, to make it manifest itself. So what does it mean in your day-to-day lives? Take notes. How many of you are taking notes? Shahil is taking notes. The commander is taking notes. It's very important, taking notes, because you do not want to waste your time just sitting here. You want to learn knowledge, not because what I'm saying is golden, I'm not saying that. Because when you take notes, you will have the time to reflect and challenge it. He said this, do I agree with it? Or maybe not, maybe there's a better way of saying it. That's extremely important. And that's what Vedic philosophy talks about, because when we say harmony with nature, to me means is harmonizing thoughts. And to harmonize thought doesn't mean you have to agree, but you have to create the orchestra of different thoughts, so together you can create a music, the symphony. So we have to practice. And I like to strongly suggest the faculty members here that we have to help our students, because unfortunately people are not growing up in an environment where they see this. And I was talking this morning, whenever I used to go to China to give speeches, I was amazed. The senior most government officials would come and sit in the first row. And they do not just come to open the session, they sit through the whole session for the whole day. Where I've seen in Delhi when I come, ministers come, give the opening speeches, maybe they'll hang around if I'm the keynote speaker for a little bit. Then he does namaskar and slowly walks out. What's the purpose? There in China, what they do? They take notes. Not only sitting for the whole day, they take notes. To me, that's harmony with nature. That here is someone who's trying to speak, whether I agree or disagree with him or her, I will take notes and try to reflect on them. Extremely important. Second, which is what I would call 360-degree sense of excellence in every dimension. What does excellence mean? We use the word center of excellence. Particularly in India, it has become a very fashionable term. We are creating center of excellence in X, in Y, in Z. But excellence to me means seeking perfection in everything that we do. Whether you're sending an email or how you're answering a question, how you're sitting, how do I look when I stand up, am I standing on my both legs? Everything has to be reflective. I saw that in India, in Japan, where you see excellence celebrated in every moment. The way a Japanese person would take a cup of tea, will hold the cup like this and then sip with the full respect to the cup and the tea that he or she is taking. That's to me excellence. Excellence to me in the classroom, when you're talking, suppose madam is talking, listening to him or her fully and then responding. In India, I've noticed when one person is talking, the other persons begin talking without having understood. That's not excellence, that's not Vedic philosophy. Harmony means harmony. You listen to the other person, then you harmonize your thought. So, as you could see, right with the term harmony with nature, there are a lot of things we have to do differently, which I would call the behavioral capital. We talk about intellectual capital, we talk about skills, but we do not talk about behavioral capital. How do we behave? How do we sit? How do we stand? How do we smile? How do we make eye contacts? How do we take notes? These would be very, very important. So that's one thing we could first practice in our own country, and then the world would look up to us. One thing I have heard whenever people go to Japan, what a beautiful country. Anyone of you been to Japan? No? I must say, Vivekananda used to say that I hope every Indian would visit Japan after he visited Japan. That was in 1893, before he went to Chicago. Literally wrote to his friends in Calcutta that I hope every Indian would one day visit Japan. And the reason he said that, because he saw more than 100 years ago, 1893, that each and every element of Vedic philosophy is being practiced in Japan. And I see that. I used to live in Japan for 20 years. I saw that. Every moment, every little thing, the Vedic philosophy is practicing. People, whenever they meet, they bow down. There's a complete sense of humility. When they take tea or when they eat, they stand straight and do everything in a very, I would say many ways, in a very militaristic way, Navy way. There's a discipline. Why can't we do that? So that's the first part. The second part, what I feel we have got to do for the world, we talked about the climate change. I was telling Commander today that when I used to give speeches in India, in Delhi, in Calcutta, in Bombay, Madras, I used to go in all the four corners of the country. I used to talk about India's got three fundamental advantages. One I used to call Vedic advantage. The second one I used to call diversity advantage. And the third I used to call time zone advantage. And let me explain to you each one of them. And I think Rishihood could literally build on these three advantages. Vedic advantage is how to literally take advantage of our rich knowledge of Vedic philosophy, which means you have to practice it, as I discussed a bit earlier. The second one is diversity advantage. Very few countries could talk about that we have got so many different languages. Each of them has got very rich heritage. How to respect. And so I always said each language, that every Indian should learn at least 5 languages, Indian language. No point feeling proud that I speak very good English or French or German. Let's feel proud that I speak very good 5 Indian languages. And 5 is a must. If you are from South, 2 Northern Indian languages plus 3 Southern. If you're from the East, 2 Eastern, 3 Western. And I think that will bring a different kind of thinking capability. Often people ask me that why there are so many stars from Bengal. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Vivekananda, Ramakrishna, you can go on and on. Aurobindo and Netaji and Satyan Bose, Jagadish Bose, Prafulli Chandra Ray. And I started wondering what could be the reason. And what I sensed that Raja Ram Mohan Roy used to speak 6 languages because somehow there was a melting taking place in the eastern part of India. There was a Chinese influence, there was a Eastern, Western, Southern influence, and in the process the minds develop very easily. So India has that advantage. So if you are from Punjab, it's important to understand Tamil Nadu and the structure of that language and respect their language as I would like to say a Tamilian respecting language from Himachal Pradesh. Unfortunately, we are not doing that well. Do you agree? We get along, but we can do that much better.
At one time, Telugu was taught in Haryana.
Telugu, once upon a time, see?
States used to have collaboration, two states, and Telugu was taught in Haryana schools.
See, once upon a time. It should be more today than once upon a time. There were a lot of things once upon a time we did a better job. Today, if I speak Punjabi, I am very comfortable with Punjabi as long as I speak English. And if I speak English, I'm not so good in Punjabi, oh, that's fine. Who cares? No, it should be the other way around. I think right at
this day, everybody speaks English after 8 p.m.
There we go. So I think this is a very important topic, the diversity advantage, because the reason I'll tell you now from a more scientific point of view, in the way the globalization has taken place. The one is integration of thoughts. How do I combine Kanban system, which is Japanese, a Kaizen, with a Western idea, and together you can create a better idea. Now you can only do that when you have access to this diversity, and then you have the attitude to manage the diversity to your advantage. So I think we have to learn that trick, because that way you will see our ability to innovate would increase significantly. One area India has not done well, though we have given birth to the concept of zero, infinity, and some great ideas that has come from the ancient ages, but in the last 200 years, very few new product ideas have come from this country. We have taken other ideas and kind of tailored it for India, but we have not innovated. Why? If we are so smart, our heritage is so rich, why we are not being able to innovate? It's a very important question. Why we cannot think out of the box? And the point I make, because I feel we lack courage. Because to break the rules, you have to have the courage to break the rules. Break the rules not by crossing the red light, I mean. Break the rules is, could I make a microphone without having the stem? It automatically becomes active when someone starts speaking, and this is invisible. That's virtual reality, augmented reality. So I think we have to begin that process. And that's where I would like to see Rishi Hood take tremendous amount of leadership, because to me leadership means courage, courage to innovate, courage to think in new terms, courage to make the world a better place. We do not have to wait for people like Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and many others. I like to see some new ideas coming from this country. And that's very important. And I think given the name of this university, Rishi Hood, to me Rishi Hood will become real when we truly become rishis. And what does rishis do? They used to imagine, they used to meditate, they used to understand the nature. And more you understand the nature, more you will find new ways to engage with nature, and new product ideas would develop. Right? So that's what I call the diversity advantage. But the time zone advantage is the biggest advantage for all of us. And what does it mean? Now, fortunately, because we are a poor country, fortunately, 80% of our country is still in the early stages of development. They don't have access to perhaps the kind of air conditioning, electricity that we are. These are Western products. If you look at this room, it's a Western room. But 80%, maybe 70% of the country lives in the situation which was perhaps 300 years ago the world used to live. Now the Western world is rejecting the industrial products which came out in the last 200 years, they realize they're not eco-friendly. They create a lot of carbon footprint. They're creating the carbon problem. But India has an advantage because 70% of people are not participating in that world which we are rejecting now. You're with me? That's our advantage. So we have a cleaner sheet of paper to work with. The top 10% like us are already spoiled, but we are minority. All of us in this room are minority, by the way. The majority is out there in the villages of Haryana and Punjab and Tamil Nadu and Kerala and Assam. So I think if we can engage with this group with a new perspective, India could create the next model for the world. As the West created, England, Germany, later on United States created the current world that we are living. Thanks to James Watt, thanks to Thomas Edison, thanks to Henry Rockefeller, thanks to Ford, they created these concepts. And we are all enjoying it. But it's high time we take advantage of this time zone advantage to create on a clean sheet of paper the new models of the 21st century. That addresses some of the 7 points that I talked about. So that's what I mean by the time zone advantage. Let me go back to the diversity advantage. That's where the leadership comes in. You know, one of the problems that I see in the world today is lack of the kind of leadership the world needs today. It was okay for the Industrial Revolution that we define leadership by how much you could create in terms of economic value, but we often forget the human value and the spiritual value. World is craving for that, but the world doesn't know how to quantify it. The world doesn't know how to articulate it. And I think it is a great opportunity for us, and particularly Leadership University could take the leadership, how to define that new world of leadership, which is significantly based on the spiritual development of the individual, spiritual development, along with intellectual and physical development. So I think one thing I was very impressed to see, the sports complex you have, is extremely important, that we are physically fit, intellectually fit, and spiritually fit. Because when these three kind of fitness come together, we are qualifying ourselves to create a fitter world. You know, my last point I'd like to make, Charles Darwin's big claim to fame was survival of the fittest. What does that mean? Ultimately, there will be one fit species, everyone else would disappear. That's a fundamentally wrong concept. It does not serve the harmony with nature. So I talk about this fitness of nature, not the survival of the fittest. We have to focus on fitness of nature. And what does fitness of nature mean? That we know how to respect each and every species, each and every element which surrounds us, the ecosystem that has created us. So that's where I think you have a tremendous opportunity, but it is a serious challenge. You cannot just feel good about it. We have tremendous amount of knowledge, but we have to make some behavioral changes. The points that I made about discipline, ethics, timeliness, we waste our time. I was very glad to see today we started our meeting at 6 o'clock, and I told Shahil that I will take 40 minutes. He's almost there, 2 minutes. So this is important. You know what, because how I want to honor him, because I promised him 40 minutes. I do not want to cut short. I do not want to go over. That's called just in time. That's what Japanese practice. We have borrowed the term just in time. And the whole world is talking about just in time. But just in time is a culture. Today at 1:30, I had a Zoom call with Japan. Commander was there. At 1:29, I left the meeting, in a very important meeting we are having on leadership. And I made my call. Except I made the call shorter, but I wanted to come back to the meeting. Just in time. We rarely do that. We typically, I've seen even in the United States, when Indians are having parties, I'm supposed to come at 7, I show up at 8. Now, fortunately, I don't do that because I believe I spend much of my time in Japan, but I always early. I typically wait 1 hour before the other guests show up. I said, okay, that's fine. So I have a personal time with the host, so that's good. But why can't we do that? Only place we hurry up when we are trying to get out of the plane. Immediately. It's amazing. Amazing. Even today I was coming through Qatar Airways and I felt sorry. The people, as soon as the plane landed, the people who stood up are all Indians. There are others who are still standing. So however proud I am of Vedic philosophy and our heritage, but when I see this, I feel, what image are we creating about ourselves? And he cannot get out of the plane. Commander, we have to work on this. We are developing an IIT Kharagpur, the final point I want to make.
Next time, जो भी पढ़ा उसका collar पकड़ के नीचे उठाओ.
So, करने पड़ेगा. But again, I believe in harmony with nature. See, that's where we are challenged. Harmony with nature means that I have to harmonize with him, however badly he behaves. But that's the challenge. But when he badly behaves, could I send out a signal without hurting him? I don't mean you. Without hurting him, that, you know, I'm noticing you. And I behave in such a way, he will become alert. Now that's another point I notice, we Indians are not alert. We do not observe how other societies are behaving. Because many of us have been to Japan, and I've seen Indian people living in Japan. There's so much to learn from Japan, but I do not see that they're absorbing it. You know, the way they stand when they're eating, when they take the drink, the way they bow down, is a piece of art. Why can't we practice it? Now, I'm not saying that we have to follow the Japanese. Let's develop our art, the Indian art of being courteous, being on time, being ethical, crossing the road at the right place, stopping at the red light, not encouraging your driver, chalo, 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 nikal jao. That we have to stop. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much. It's just about 40, because you took 2 minutes to introduce me, sir. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. I spoke from my heart. You know, I brought some notes, but I didn't open it. I thought, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. Now you can ask me any questions. That's more important. You know, when I was exchanging notes with Shahil, I asked what would be a good talk. And I thought about what I discussed with you, but he made a very good suggestion. Given that you have met a lot of leaders around the world, would you talk about leaders and what I have learned from them, or what they have learned from me, vice versa? Because leadership is a mutual learning process. I can talk about that, but feel free to raise any questions.
So there's a question from this thing. Do you think things are as bad, considering even if we were keeping all those 7 points in mind? I think we do have a youth which the rest of the world doesn't have as a demographic dividend. And so yes, partly we in our earlier generation might have made it a little too easy for them to not be able to respect all those things which you've talked about. But I think there's still hope that they will take things in their stride.
Yeah, you know.
Since other people have already made their mistakes, which we should learn from, so they would be facing some challenges because of that.
Well, there are 2 points to your question. You know, one thing I always notice, I read 7 5-year plans. The first 5-year, the second 5-year, the third 5-year, till the 7th one, 8th one actually. And what I noticed, in every plan, there's one statement: India is at crossroads. And we are at crossroads. So I think, then I asked myself, why? And then I was sharing with this group this morning, Abdul Kalam, we all respect, President of India, and he with Rajan, Rajan?
Vice Rajan.
Yeah, that's right. They wrote a book called Vision 2020. I don't know whether you read it or not. And it was published in 1996. And one place, the statement makes very clearly, India would be a developed country by 2020, if not earlier. I believe, if not earlier. Now, we are in 2022. Now, so I think there is a tendency in our ethos, which is good, that we hope things will be good. But hoping and the desire is one, and then organizing ourselves to get there is something else. We often do not realize what it takes. You know, if you ask me, suppose you make me the Prime Minister of this country, and that's why I like Mr. Modi a lot, that if I was the Prime Minister, I will focus on developing a culture which I am very proud of. The per capita income would follow, but we do everything in timely. If we lift a bottle of water, we put it back in the proper way, as opposed to clumsily lying around all over the place. Develop a culture where everyone believes in work ethics, does it perfectly. You know, when I buy things from the cottage industry, I always buy something for my American friends, and I always find defects. And what they say, हाथ का काम साहब तो खराब होगा. अरे भाई जापान में जाइए आप, उधर में हाथ का काम means perfection. Machine का काम खराब होता है. Machine doesn't have the human touch. See, that has got into our blood. We believe if it's handmade, it has to have some defects. But handmade cars, handmade carpentry is supposed to be absolutely perfect. So we have to work on these. These are the cultural aspects. If we don't talk about life, will go on. Because mind you, when India became independent, now I always think of India as undivided India, not divided. I recently published a book called India at 100, a call for reset. And reset is undivided India. By the way, the picture that the publishers put is a funny shape of India, but that's what the international people believe in. But I don't care, because the content is more important. But the point I want to make, India's population when I was born was 350 million. Still the second largest economy in the world, number of people after China. But now it is 1.4. So this habit that we are talking about has expanded by a factor of 4. So if we don't stop it now, it will be more difficult to stop. It's a matter of time. I've always heard from people like Abid Hussain, Partha, in a matter of time, everything will become okay. But everything will not become okay unless we work on the behavioral capital. It's not a matter of making investments and hope things will happen. You have to manage the machine. You know, I once visited IIM Bangalore, long time ago. When IIM Bangalore was about 5 years old. And I was moving around, I asked the director, how old is this building? Because the building was already, I could see kind of crumbling. He said, it's 6 years old. We do not know how to maintain. I go to IIT Kharagpur, hostels are breaking apart. Why? We do not maintain a budget for what I call maintenance. That this room has to be maintained. Little things may be coming out after a while, the new room. And I think we have to develop that habit. And that's what, unfortunately, the maintenance culture, the timeliness culture, the urgency culture. Those are the factors we have to work on. And I think we need about 10 years. But we have lost 75 years. When India became independent in 1947, instead of building the steel plants or even the IITs, if the focus was we will build a culture based on Vedic philosophy, the first 10 years, today India would have been a different place. So it is a serious challenge. The other thing missing in India, I would say, is humility. We tend to become a bit arrogant. We don't listen to each other. If you believe in something, you believe in it and you hold on to it. You have to change the game as you learn new things. Let me move to another question. Did I answer? It's a good one. Yes, madam? Yes.
Sir, do you think population can be a hurdle between
In a country?
in development?
I do not think so, because I believe more number of brains we have if we know how to cultivate the brains properly, more number of hands we have if we know how to cultivate the hands, more number of legs we have if we know how to cultivate the legs, because I like to see India pick up 100 gold medals, not one, in Olympics. I would like to see every year there's at least 3 Satyajit Ray type movies which picks up Oscar. We have only one Oscar, Satyajit Ray. How many years ago was it? 20, 30 years ago. So I think I look at population with a lot of care. But yeah, I think we have to manage the population growth, because 1.4 billion people are a lot of people. And we have limited number of land. So population density is very high. It is one of the highest in the world. The highest is Bangladesh, by the way. Number 2 is India. Now there are smaller countries like Holland is very high, but it's a small country. Yes, please.
Sir, as you mentioned in your talk, we lack courage to innovate. So what would you suggest should be done, so that we develop courage?
Yeah, that's a very good question. In the Academy of Leadership, which Commander is leading and is a chief advisor, we are developing a program which was creative thinking. That's what one of the proposals I made, creative thinking. And I think people have to be given the confidence that if a teacher is telling you F equal to ma, force equal to mass multiplied by acceleration, instead of learning that, you must learn that, but the homework should be, could the equation be developed in a different way? So instead of teaching the law, you expose the student to the law, but then ask, the homework could be, can you look at this from a different angle and come up with a new set of laws? Now, if you can begin that process from the high school stage, that process of looking at what we are learning from the book differently, I think we will be able to develop in individuals that ability. Now, unfortunately, if you look at India's history, people blame the British, but before that, we had the Mughal period, right? Before that, the Turks. So India has been under foreign rule for 1300 years. 1300 years. Our backbone has been broken. And we have to recognize that. 1300 years, generation after generation. Earlier to qualify to speak to the rulers of the country, you have to learn either Arabic or Persian. So think of someone in Kerala, how does he qualify? And then now you have to learn English. We have kept most of the Indians as outsiders. When I was watching last night while coming to this the Croatian football team, everyone talks in their mother tongue. BBC is interviewing, he's talking his own language with pride. The Germans speak German, Japanese speak Japanese, the Chinese speak Chinese. And a poor Keralite guy, a woman who runs PT Usha, interview, unless he speaks English, we feel he is not, or she is not literate. So I think those are the equations we have to break. We have to be extremely innovative, because now we cannot say, get rid of English, which Jyoti Basu tried in Bengal, but that put Bengal behind by 10 years or 15 years. Because his focus was, he should first learn mother tongue, Bengali.
I think it was not because of Bengali, because of many other reasons.
Okay, whatever be the other reasons, yeah.
India is, if all the problems are there, it is because of the English language. Even in India today, only 15% people speak English language. Only 15% people. So 85% people are being deprived of the so-called higher education, the so-called technical education, which NEP 2020 is going to correct it now. Now engineering and medical education will be available in all the Indian languages. And then you see how the India moves again.
Absolutely. That's what I was trying to say. that I think, which Tagore is to say, Tagore was very clear that unless you can think in your own mother tongue, you will never be able to explore the unexplored areas. Very important point. You cannot explore the unexplored areas. You can only think in mother tongue. But that's a very big statement. Very important statement. So that was the answer to your question. Yes, please.
So India is a land of cultural diversity. So
Yeah.
let's say tomorrow, any of us who's sitting here becomes a prime minister in years to come. Knowing that there are so many cultures to accommodate and people of different religions and so on, what should be the plan of action in order to ensure that we develop India with the Indian traditions and the value and the culture that you particularly mentioned about? What should be the plan of action?
That's a very good question. I often thought about it. Actually, I had a discussion on this with Jyoti Basu. It so happened. Because at one point, Jyoti Basu, I think, earned the credibility that he may be the Prime Minister of India. Remember, there was a discussion going on? And so happened that time, I was in Calcutta. I was visiting from Tokyo. And I was with Jyoti Basu in Bengal Club. And I raised that point. I hear Mr. Basu that you might be the next Prime Minister. He said, not possible. I said, why? His point was, unless he used the language, unless you are from the Hindi-speaking belt, you cannot become the Prime Minister of the country. Now, that raises a very interesting point. We may have a very highly qualified person in Kerala, or Tamil Nadu, or Andhra. Actually, Andhra, we had a Prime Minister, right?
He was the most successful president.
Yeah, Narasimha Rao. Yeah. Deve Gowda from Bangalore.
Gujarat, Punjab.
Yeah, exactly.
Punjab.
Exactly. So we have to create. Yeah. So there is models, but somehow there's some belief, some parts of India, that I think we have to create a model where whether you come from Manipur or from Assam or from Orissa, you could be the Prime Minister.
Gujarati.
Yeah.
Modi, Gujarati.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Most successful Prime Minister.
Actually, quite a bit like Hindi.
अजी नहीं जनाब क्या बात करते हैं आप गुजराती आप समझ नहीं पाएंगे जब it's a totally different language so नहीं तो जाके बंगाली is also very similar to Hindi मैं जब बंगाल गया तो पहली बार सर first time I was going beyond Delhi you can say while traveling from Howrah to Kharagpur I was just reading the names of railway stations in Hindi and Bangla. By the time I reached Kharagpur I was reading all the boards
Wow. In one day.
It's so simple.
No, absolutely. So I think we have to you have got the answer. As long as the mind is diverse. Mind has to be diverse. You have to have the courage that you should not feel like an outsider. Though I am coming from Tamil Nadu, I should not feel like an outsider in Delhi. It's as much my country as Delhiites, Delhi. That spirit is there and people who are living in Delhi can deal with the Tamilian with the same spirit. I think diversity would be a big plus of the country. Big plus. Because they say California has done very well and US Silicon Valley does very well because of diversity. But we have the diversity in this country
Much more.
given. So let's take advantage of it. We have to find ways. I think maybe we do not have mechanisms and we have to design the mechanism. That could be part of our Academy of Leadership work or Rishiwood work. That how to, have one festival in Bengali, in Rishiwood, another festival in Gujarati. So that way we create a new mechanism of loving each other, loving other languages.
I think we believe in coexistence, we believe in collaboration with different cultures,
Right.
with different languages. We coexist very beautifully everywhere. There is hardly any clash based on language or different
Religion.
We just don't have. People accept it.
Yes, please. Yellow, then, yeah. Well, I already picked on you.
Right.
Huh? Yes, please.
Sir, you talked about excellence.
Yeah.
And the general observation is that Indians are in a chalta hai mindset.
Yeah.
Everything, as long as it is working, it's okay, instead of excellence. So how do we plan to change the mindset so that at such a huge level, the population is huge, to make up a change, a revolution, so that we can reach excellence from that casual attitude?
That's a $1 trillion question. But I've thought about it though. I thought about it from 3 different angles. One, as you know, Shail, in your introduction you mentioned, I basically grew up as a gypsy all over the world as a problem solver. I'm in the management consulting profession. So I solved all kinds of problems from the Prime Minister level to CEO levels. And what I learned in the process, that the excellence as a culture has to be embedded very early on as a development process, very early on. Like I was talking about in Japan, my wife is Japanese. I noticed when my kids were 2 years, I've got twins, they were 2 years old, my wife is to instruct the kids how to put on their clothes. She did not ever put on their clothes. It was put it up, give it to them, they'll put on the clothes. And they had to make their beds absolutely perfectly. Otherwise they cannot go to school. It should look perfect. So one side of excellence is that has to be embedded in the home, but then if the parents do not know about it, how would you embed? So there has to be, instead of all these Bollywoods and Hollywoods going on in Indian television, I think there has to be program on day-to-day living, what it is, so that our parents could learn how they should live, so their children could learn. So that's point number 1. The second point I want to make, that when I talked about the corporate consulting that I do, culture can be managed. Many companies, when they struggle with, say, manufacturing efficiency, I've noticed it is not because they do not have the right machine or the right leader, they have the wrong culture. The culture of excellence in manufacturing, then you have to really break it down to small things. Then how do I manage timeliness? How do I manage perfection? So when I'm drawing a line, it should be perfectly straight, not crooked. Or when I'm writing a letter, it has to be perfect. So I think excellence has to be practiced. Or when I'm dressing up, is my jacket looking well? Is properly placed? When I'm putting on my glasses, am I putting it up properly? So I personally feel this has to be taught at a very early stage, but now we have 1.4 billion people who are adults, out of which I think 60% are adult, or 1.4. So how do we bring change in them, whether it's a man or a woman? I think we have to organize a program. And that could be another facet of Rishihood University, where I think, Commander, you call etiquette. Etiquette, excellence etiquette, what does it mean? So these are the methods we have to undertake. I'm afraid it will not be easy. There's no rule that all of a sudden we become excellent. We have to practice all the little details. Like, when I look at I was exposed to the soccer team of Japan because I used to play soccer, so I used to go to see their practice. They used to literally practice 8 hours a day and all programmed. What will they do at 4 to 5 o'clock in the morning? Then what should they do in the weight room? Then they will practice again. They were preparing for Olympics. It was actually 8-hour program, including taking classes where they will talk on the whiteboard what should be their passing strategies for different teams. They're watching TV on one side, the game going on with Germany and, say, Korea. They're trying to learn, when they're playing against Korea, how they should move their balls, and when playing against Germany. So this kind of details are required. Are we doing that? Now, the cricket team in India under Rohit, who is the current captain, they are, I think, developing these approaches of excellence, particularly the weight training and fitness training. The women's team is also very impressive. So as you could see, there are such elements, but we have to spread it across. Yes, please.
So first and foremost, thanks to you. You have given more than 35 points to deliberate upon. And one of your points that you made, I would like to explain it a little more. The point is that you made was that 70% of India has not been participating into the Western culture, which we are already rejecting. So at this point of time, when we are talking about creating a new leadership, how do we really go back and integrate the 70% of the world in India, which is not participated in the last 75 years? So how do we integrate it? Where do we create? Do we create in the 30% of the world that is already engaging with the Western world and rejecting their philosophies? Or do we create in 70? How do we go about that?
Very brilliant question. I think I'd like to come next time to answer this question properly, but I'll give you a quick answer, because this needs deep thinking. See, when you were talking, I've been in those situations, but not in the scale of 1.4 billion people. I've been in a situation where I'm talking about a company changing from one style of management to another style of management. So, can I use the board? Yeah. So the challenge is, now what is interesting to India today, there's 20% who is in this mode. Let's say westernized.
What's on the axis?
Okay, very good. Who asked that question?
The economist.
Excellent. You should always ask, whenever someone plots a chart, you should always ask what is x-axis and y-axis. Very important. Otherwise it doesn't make any sense. So I'm glad you asked that question. So let's call this, I will call socio-economic development. So I would not just think of per capita income. I will call it, let's say, HDI index, Human Development Index, whatever that is, okay? And this one I would call resource commitment, not time, how much dollars we are spending to build the country per capita. Now, China and Japan have been extremely, and Korea, efficient. Per dollar invested per capita has resulted tremendous uplift. That means very little money is wasted. Every money is used very intelligently. Now, what we are talking about, 20% of India, 80% is here. Maybe 70%. Another 10% could be somewhere here, right? So what you are telling me, that on one side we need a strategy to create the new model of development, and bulk of India's effort should be here, because this one we succeed, then becomes model for the world. This part should continue in a fashion so that as this part takes off, the new model takes off, it could join this model. So we should not discourage, because all of a sudden if we stop these lights and fans, we are all of a sudden bringing the economy to a halt, which we cannot afford. So we have to sustain this with caution and take off this very rapidly so that this merger could happen 30 years, 35 years from now. Now what is happening, this group, aspiration is here. This group's aspiration. We want to be, if I'm driving a bike, someone who doesn't have a bike, he also wants to buy the bike. But we do not have the metal to have so many bikes. We do not have the hydrocarbons to run so many bikes. We do not have the air to throw the carbon dioxide. You know how the pollution in Delhi is the worst in the world. At least 2 years ago. I don't know, it's better maybe now. 2 years ago, I had the data that the number of particulates particularly in the winter months, is way above what is considered to be allowable. So which is again a strategic disadvantage. If when you talked about number of people, our people, if they're not healthy, is a liability. If they're healthy, it's an asset. Because they have the brain, they have the muscle, as I mentioned. And we can use the muscles to run the Olympics and participate in different activities, and use the brain to create new product, new ideas, particularly for this part. Then what will happen, my view of India is that if this we can manage right, this will become the model, and the rest of the world will start chasing us. That's the time we can say, again Tagore, I have to quote, Tagore wrote, Bharat abar jagote sabai shreshto asana labe. Means Bharat will again take the most prestigious place in Assembly of Nations. All these hopes are there. But now we have to convert, but it needs serious work. That's my answer to you. Okay. Well, did I answer it right?
Sir, with your permission, can I add a few?
Oh, of course.
This 70% thing, leapfrog technology.
Right.
The whole world was using PCXT, PC80. We straight away jumped to Pentium in India. Most of us, straight away, Pentium. Leapfrog technology. People have gone through, how many people use cars in India? Maybe let's say 20% people. Now we are straight away switching to EVs. Straight away. So EV bikes आनी शुरू हो गई, दबा करके आ रही है जबरदस्त. EV cars दबा करके आ रही हैं. Fine. So again, that 70% people, they don't have to follow the same path. So straight away technology is changing the way things are happening. Now, हर घर में नल और हर नल में जल, which was not there for 80% of the people, now it is going to happen by the end of 2024. Our infrastructure, our roads, some places the roads are non-existent altogether. Suddenly we are going to have beautiful roads all over. And that is how that 70% people are going to get straight away advantage. And India will gallop. So all the challenges, we have to convert them into opportunities. We had a lot of challenges, there is no doubt about that. But let us convert them into opportunities, which is happening. और दूसरा जो excellence का बोल रहे थे, excellence is doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. Excellence is doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. अब ये प्रोग्राम कंडक्ट किया गया in an extraordinary way. हम लोग मेन गेट पे पहुंचे, ड्राइवर न्यू इट, पार्थो घोष बोलता ही दरवाजा खोल दिया, टक करके आइए सर, यहाँ पर एकदम आइए सर, इनके रूम में आए चाय कॉफी सर, और उसके फॉलोड बाय समोसास, and here we came, everybody was sitting, excellent तरीके से. So you people have organized this small program in an excellent way. So this is excellence. We have achieved excellence. And
we started the meeting at 6 o'clock.
So what's the question for you? So as sir said that the per capita income of Japan is $18,000.
No, China. Japan is 40,000.
Sorry, China. And in India it's 2,000.
2,100.
So how much time will India take to reach that goal?
That's a very good question. Again, I've become a professor now. You have to give me a title. You have to give me a title first, right? So can you repeat the question one more time?
As you said, the per capita income of India is $2,000. So how much time will it take to reach that goal?
There are 2 points. Often people say, we'll catch up. See, if you see the plot of Japan, I'll plot from 1950 to 2020. So this is 70 years, huh? Funnily enough, Japan was here, India was here, China was here. China, if I recall, was $100 per capita. India was 110. Japan was destroyed, but it was 170. As you know, Japan was destroyed. But Japan went like this. So Japan today is $45,000. China took off like this, it is $16,000. and India has been like this. Now, the question is how much time, because it's not good enough to catch up, because by the time we go to 16,000, China has gone there. It's all relative. Because if I am poor, I am only poor because you are rich. Because if you are as poor as I am, we are equal. We often forget that. So now, let's assume China would grow. This period of China has been 9 to 12% a year, per capita, not total. The total is a bit misleading because India, they say, is the third biggest economy. But obviously, with 1.4 billion, the per capita income is a little bit higher than Switzerland, will become much bigger than Switzerland. But Switzerland per capita income is about $80,000, right? So now, I personally feel if we can speed it up for 10 to 12% per year, every year, for next 25 years, I think, and China would slow down, maybe we'll come close to China. But this means we have to work extremely hard. Very positive culture, and nothing could be wasted. Nothing could be wasted because we waste a lot of money.
ये आपके ऊपर डिपेंड करता है जो लोग यहाँ बैठे हैं.
Yeah, it all depends upon you, and that's why this discussion is very important. I mean, I find this personally very rewarding because if we can really absorb, because I did not have this discussion when I was in IIT. We said everything is Hankidori, you are in IIT, things will happen. But now I realize things don't happen unless there's an effort made. And a lot of it is culture. If you go to Vietnam, for example, an average Vietnamese, if you meet him on the road, he's not very impressive. Indians are much more impressive. But companies are choosing the people who are coming out of China, they're looking at Vietnam and India. If they look at 10 situations, 8 of them are going to Vietnam. Why? Because of the culture of excellence is more visible. They're simple people, but when you go to their factories, they're clean, they're very simple, but they're doing the work on time. They come to the factory on time. They work in a very dedicated way. And that is easier to trust than I'm looking smart, but then when I do the work, it doesn't get done in time. And I always have a good excuse why I couldn't do it. That will not work. So that's where you guys have to create a new culture. And you have to really work on it. And don't blame others, work on yourself and become a model. As Gandhi used to say, be the change yourself, right? But we have to.
So,
yes, please.
good evening, sir.
Good evening.
As you are talking about...
By the way, I should ask you, what is your name?
Priya Singh.
Priya Singh. I have to catch up with the others' name, but Priya. Okay, please.
So, as you are talking about the culture, and you have already told about the Japanese culture, that we Indians should once in a life visit Japan and learn their language. But I think, sir, correct me if I am wrong, but I think we Indians already have a rich culture, and but just because of the Western dominance, we Indians are forgetting our own culture.
Right.
And we need to think about and we need to learn about our ancient culture. That's how we can improve.
Absolutely.
And that time we don't have to look at others' culture.
2 points. I fully agree with you. That was the purpose of our talk. What we say, that we want to use the treasure of our wisdom resident in our Vedic culture. But when I talked about Japan, I'm not talking about Japanese philosophy. I'm talking about how Japan is celebrating Indian philosophy, Vedic philosophy. Because it's nice to say we have rich culture, but if I don't practice it, there's no meaning. We are not practicing it. So please practice. Then if I practice, you practice, our country would look different. And that's what we are talking about.
So that's my question. So how do you think that we can practice our ancient culture, and how you can say the youth that to practice our ancient culture instead of being influenced by others' culture?
No, we are not. That's exactly the point. We don't want to be influenced by other culture. But if other cultures have practiced our culture better, then we could learn from other culture. That's what we are talking about. You know, I made a list, let me quickly, which I touched on, but I want to make sure. The first thing I said, that to celebrate Vedic philosophy, I said 360-degree discipline of excellence, right? So let's celebrate that. Japan is celebrating it, we are not. Vedic philosophy is talking about it, we are reciting it in mantras, but we are not practicing it. That was the dialogue between Arjuna and Sri Krishna in Gita. Go and fight the battle. Second, work ethics. To me, it means attention to minutest details, and every detail you have to worship. Every detail is a place of pilgrimage. Think about that. Okay. Priya, very good question. Then honesty and trustworthiness in every interface. As you and I are talking to each other, I'm trying to my best to expose my heart to you, as you are trying your best. And let that be so trustworthy that we truly become trusted friends. In India, we often do not do that well. That's why I don't know what is the corruption, I don't manage, but I hear about corruption. And a lot of it is intellectual corruption, which is not allowed. Value of time. That's why I was continuously, and as also commander respected, that we managed our time extremely well. 6 o'clock, we were supposed to start, we started at 6. We can do it, but then we have to do it every time. Every time, starting meetings at the right time. Whether it's in your home, whether it's in office. Now, we cannot say because of traffic jam I got late. If you know there's going to be traffic jam, build it in your calculations. Because that is an excuse I hear all the time. Kya karega by traffic matter? But then I heard there was no traffic. But then he's saying that because it's so easy. Because in India to find excuses is very, very easy. Except, as I said, when you want to get out of the plane, we become very time conscious. Clean habits. Zero wastage. That is the rule again Japan follows. You know, when people talk about Kanban system, just in time, we do not want to carry any inventory unnecessarily. If the product has to be used right now, the product comes in from another factory. That has happened when each one of us can honor each other. Now, if I know every time I'm late, commander would keep some buffer for me. Partha would not come on time, so he wants to start at 6, he has told me to come at 5:30. And I also know he will start at 6, so I decide to come at 6:15. And sometimes ministers enjoy to keep people waiting. That is changing, I think, now, I heard. Am I right?
Yeah, most of them know.
All the time?
Most of them, again, not all.
All right, okay.
They are defaulters.
Yeah, defaulter.
They will be always there.
So, Madam, with Priya, we are talking about that. I'm not talking about you have to go and understand Japanese culture. But what Vivekananda was saying, I'm not saying, but I feel the same way, that I hope people from India came to understand what is the richness of Indian culture being practiced in Japan. That's what he was saying. And I felt the same way, irrespective of what Vivekananda said. I felt the same way as soon as my first visit in. It was not a Western country. My image of development was, it has to be Western. But when I first went to Japan in 1980, I noticed here is an Asian country which economically advanced, but very different from United States and United Kingdom. Very different. Hardly anyone speaks English. Everything is working. There are 150 brand names in the world. Sony, Toyota, Hitachi, Canon, Seiko, you can name it, all achieved in 15 years. If you look to 1960, there was not a single brand name from Japan. By 1975, There were about, I counted, about 82 brand names. Now, could we do that? See, that's what we have to do. So brands would come out of this. Could Rishihood be a brand? If you invite me again, I would like to make Rishihood a brand for the world, because it is an Indian meaning, Rishi. Hood, as I said, could be many, many meanings, but we say childhood. But Rishihood means that we have to always remain youthful so that we could explore the unknown. And that's...
In case of institutes and universities, who makes the brand? It is the youth. The alumni, when you go to the market, you go to all over the world, you build a brand. Today IT is a brand because the IT alumni, they have made it. IT तो वहीं पर है. So the people who went all around, they have made the brand IT. So similarly, आप जो पहला बैच, दूसरा बैच जो भी है शुरू के बैचेस, you would build a Rishihood brand.
Absolutely, beautifully said.
It's on your shoulders now to build that Rishihood brand. क्यों जी? ठीक बोला?
Agree. Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
So this is a month after I returned back from the US. So I have many perspectives to share, but after living here for 4 months, I realized that the story that we need to share is the story of resilience of India. I'm very happy that India did not follow the path chalked out by America and England and even Japan. Because if India would have started demanding the quality of life that Japan and other countries are demanding, Earth does not have resources to support. So I think India is just on the verge of chalking its own path. That I tell people when my personal changes, the kind of society that India can create, the West cannot even conceive. That much potential is there in this country. So rather than like telling us or sharing with people what they lack, I think if you can celebrate the resilience of the society, 1300 years of subjugation, and yet we have Sampadananji here, against all odds, he is standing firm with his belief in power of Sanskrit. There are many people in different pockets of India. They are just doing amazing work that I was not aware when I was in the US. So I think we have to give that encouragement to them that there is in India that we can create that is beyond the conception of West.
I will just add one thing. Have any one of you been to any Gurukul? आप गए हो गुरुकुल में किसी ने? कहाँ पर?
Kerala.
Kerala. Great. Anybody else? I happened to go to Kurukshetra Gurukul 6 months back. Kurukshetra Gurukul, Dr. Devrat ji, who is the governor of Gujarat now, he started it. I tell you, it's amazing. I couldn't imagine that Gurukul can be like this. घुड़सवारी बच्चे सीखते हैं वहाँ पर, शूटिंग सीखते हैं वहाँ पर, फुटबॉल, हॉकी, इतने जबरदस्त प्लेग्राउंड्स हैं वहाँ पर. My mind about the Gurukul changed. Of course, there are the cows also in one area where children get the pure गाय का milk also पीने के लिए. That's crazy. You just make visit for all your students, one like industrial visit, make a visit to Kurukshetra Gurukul. It's amazing. Eye opener. तो ये चीजें हो रही हैं हिंदुस्तान में. अच्छा, and there's a by the way competition to get into that Gurukul. Competition. और उसकी कोचिंग होती है. उसकी भी कोचिंग शुरू हो गई है.
Like IIT coaching.
Correct. और उसमें बिहार के स्टूडेंट मैक्सिमम आते हैं उसमें भी.
बिहार में.
बिहार के. तो हम लोगों ने बिहार का कोटा फिक्स कर दिया है. कि there will not more than 10% बिहार से.
That is the Lalu Prasad Yadav effect. No, I think one comment. Obviously, we all agree. There's a lot of resiliency, a lot of treasure. But now time has come. We have to make it happen.
Yeah, and your mentorship we will do.
No, we will do. I don't. After 10 years, I don't want to say we are at crossroads. It's amazing. I wouldn't believe how many speeches I have attended where people are we are at crossroads. Now we have invited Dr. Partha Ghosh, who will talk about the next S-curve. Now I feel ashamed that, you know, this is for last 30 years I've been in the crossroad. So we have to work on it. Absolutely.
So may I make?
Yes, please.
So first of all, dhanyawad to you, sir, for presenting what we expected. It was coming as if, you know, like, oh, this is what we wanted to tell our students. All that we wanted our students should know, you have spoken about it.
Thank you.
Second thing is that it has given a confirmation to all of us that we are on the right path. It also must have created some confidence, you all students. Some of you have have really raised this question, why certain things are done at Rishihut. Some of you have this question but have not raised, but must have discussed amongst your friends that why do we do certain things at Rishihut? And you have got the answer today. And you also reminded me, like before you said that you lived 20 years in Japan, the moment I entered here, I knew that you must have lived in Japan.
Oh.
Yes, I have not been to Japan.
Okay.
But I speak about Japanese culture. The mother, I come from Sri Aurobindo Ashram.
Oh.
So the mother has lived and she speaks highly about Japanese culture.
Oh, she did, absolutely.
Yes, she did. She
in
lived
Pondicherry.
4 years.
Yeah.
She lived 4 years in Japan where
Yeah.
she met Rabindranath Tagore also. And what was her question that, and he has answered to it very rightly, because he said the Vedic culture in practice that you see, like every nation has a soul of it. If you speak of Western Europe, the material perfection is the very soul of it.
Right.
If you speak of Japan, it is the aesthetic culture, everything. Like if you, I give this example, like if you ask a Japanese person to remove this chair, so he will simply put it and then go and keep it.
Very artistically.
Very artistically. And you ask them, why do you do that? He said, I feel joy doing it. If I don't do it in that way, there's no joy in it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And when we say that we have to, you know, like learn from some other country. Yesterday I was in Sahitya Academy. So there was another speaker, my co-speaker with me. She was giving the example of Vinoba Bhave, who has used a word Gunachumbi. Gunachumbi. Gunachumbi means anyone in the world, anyone other than you, has some quality. You like a magnet capture that guna. So whatever the nation may be, whichever country, wherever truth has manifest, because this is a land of truth seekers, this is a land of light, this is a land of truth, land of rishis. So we need to assimilate all that is best in the world, assimilate into ourselves and make it, and we have to be careful it is conducive to our own swabhava and swadharma. And India, as Sri Aurobindo has rightly put, can develop, can truly become the top by being herself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
By being herself. And then you also reminded the 3 tasks which Sri Aurobindo has given, has spoken about it. And you started with that the first task is to recover the spiritual wisdom that we have, your Vedic advantage.
Right. Absolutely.
And then once we have recovered that knowledge, then percolate into every aspect of life, and then create what you said, create new forms of philosophy, new forms of religion,
Absolutely.
new forms of literature, everything new forms of architecture, new forms of design.
Mm-hmm.
And thirdly, he says that this spiritual force or wisdom must be used to bring solution to all the grand challenges that humanity
Absolutely.
faces. So that's how we can make a difference,
Mm-hmm.
and everything lies in the hands of the youth.
Absolutely.
Youth of the today. And that's why, like I feel that, like as he said, Like during his time, he didn't attend any such lecture today. You all are, like listening to him. You all are privileged ones. I never had the opportunity of it. You spoke about Gurukul, sir. I'm just coming back from a Gurukul here in Murthal. Okay, it's 100 years old Gurukul. An amazing purity that you will feel in that Gurukul, how they have maintained. They have not moved out. They said that we don't want our children to come in contact with out, because it's a very different kind of Gurukul in the sense they have preserved the Shastras in its pure form. And today, many people who have come out of that, they are President Awardee, they are the greatest pundits and scholars of this country at present.
Thank you.
So we need to bring back and then live our own tradition, then only we can. So your talk today and in future also, like you are going to be a part of it, we will not leave you just like that.
Thank you very much.
Yes, so it has created confidence in us that we are on the right path.
Thank you very much.
And it must have created more confidence in you all in children. Yes or not?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. One thing I would like to make, I'm so glad that you talked about Aurobindo. Because we talk about Vivekananda, we talk about Tagore. But the other person I think we should keep at the center stage of our thinking is Aurobindo. Because his understanding of Indian civilization and philosophy is perhaps the deepest. So I think we have to have a special course on Aurobindo.
I think somebody should...
We started last year, July, 150 hours course on Sri Aurobindo's teachings.
Excellent.
And we had 80 students from all over the world. And then we did 3 national, international seminars on Sri Aurobindo. And also we had a series of, it's called the webinars called Vaichariki. We took a particular concept, evaluated it in the light of Sri Aurobindo and tried to contextualize it. And we took some contemporary events happening and looked at it in the light of Sri Aurobindo.
I think in our academy we have to have Aurobindo's picture. I am glad you reminded, because I often feel we talk about Tagore, of course Vivekananda, we talk about Gandhi, but I think Aurobindo was a great saint, Rishi. He was the greatest Rishi of modern times. And how many of you know about Aurobindo? It's very interesting that I want to share with you something which I find very interesting. He had 5 chapters in his life. Literally 5 chapters, and very distinctly different. Then he realized that maybe he has to develop the spiritual base of the country. So then he moved to Pondicherry, thanks to mother, who Pondicherry was a French colony. He arranged the land and created the Aurobindo Ashram. So that's the 5th chapter when he became a rishi. So ultimately everyone would have to come to rishihood. So I'm glad that you mentioned about Aurobindo. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think it was a wonderful session. Thanks for taking out time. And I forgot to mention, this morning he landed in Delhi and
5 o'clock in the morning. I didn't.
So amidst all the time zone change, and you still deliver a full lecture with energy and answer all the questions. Thanks a lot for taking out the time.